The next question at the panel discussion was, what kinds of strategies might be utilized to aid families to stay engaged in treatment once the client is out of let's say the rehab facility? How do you get them to stay engaged? And so I'm going to share a few strategies generally and just a comment or two about technology. There's more and more attention. Let me back this up for just a second. This first rehab experience I had a dozen years ago in a startup rehab, the prevailing mentality is that if you come into rehab addicted to something, that what we want to do psychologically, by the way, I'd never really fully subscribed to this view, so I just want to put that little caveat here. But the idea is if you come into rehab, what we want to do is get at the underlying cause of it. And the presupposition is that the underlying cause is some kind of trauma, typically one focal trauma. And once you get to that and kind of bring that to light, then whatever emotional burdens that's laying on your heart, those can be lifted, and thus your need for substance will abate or evaporate. There's so many things I could say about those assumptions. Okay. How I want to apply, I think I'll leave that discussion for another conversation. But what I want to say is that led to then the idea is that once a client leaves rehab, that the only reason that they would ever have to come back again or that they would relapse is that they didn't effectively get to that underlying cause, which was rooted typically in some idea of trauma, and typically a single trauma. I think I will comment on this. Very few of us have a single trauma that's that formative. Even people that have been in hideously extreme circumstances, combat situations, or rape. I'm thinking of clients that I've seen, but also what I know generally from the literature. Typically what complicates that are all the other traumas of the life. And so even if you have a single really focal trauma, acute trauma that stands out, it's almost always in the context of a life, and in fact that would predict somebody's response to trauma. A horrible trauma would be the amount of other trauma that they had sustained and how or not they had moved through that. And I won't go into a whole thing on trauma theory, but just to suggest the idea of rooting out a single trauma, it almost dates back to very early Freudian theory, and I don't even want to blame Freud for that. It's a way too, for lack of a better, it's way too simplistic of a notion of even trauma, and then to tie it to addiction. There were problems with that, but what it led to functionally was the client left and there'd be no need for follow-up, because after all, they've been expunged of whatever it was that led to the addiction. I think that view has evolved over the last, I know that it's evolved over the last decade or more. But then what that requires are strategic considerations. Okay, if you don't assume that somebody's leaving treatment and doesn't need any follow-up, including with their family, then how do you get the family to be involved? And I alluded to this earlier when talking about how it is that it's difficult to get families into treatment. And what means might there be, creative means of getting them involved? I think some of it involves education. I've mentioned Burr Cook, the interventionist, that mandates family treatment. He won't work, I didn't mention this earlier, he won't work with the family if they're not agreeable for everyone being in some form of recovery, in some form of counseling, some form of their own life practices, changing their lives. He won't work with them. He believes that strongly, that it's guaranteed to fail. He doesn't want to invest in that, which is a very powerful message, it seems like to me. So education, I think, on the front end. Let me name some examples of resources that are out there that are meant to be supplementary to whatever treatment went on inside the treatment facility, if it's an inpatient facility. This isn't meant to be totally self-serving, but I'll give you an example of something that I do with my partner Colleen. On every Thursday night here locally, we lead a group, we call it Recovery for Everyone. It's meant seriously and also slightly tongue-in-cheek. I came up with that term, is that more and more in the recovery literature and in addiction, the idea is that most of us have multiple addictions. Some of us have the misfortune of being addicted to a substance like alcohol or other drugs. That's what gets most of the attention. 1 out of 10 Americans are addicted to drugs such as alcohol. 1 out of 10 Americans over the age of 12 are addicted to substance. But that's limiting even substance to just being alcohol and other drugs. But there's a whole realm of other addictions that have also gotten a lot of attention. And we know most of them through the media. So there's sexual addictions, for example, to pornography. It's ubiquity on the internet and so on. Gambling addictions, the very same thing. It's like all of a sudden you can access gambling in your own living room on your laptop. Eating addictions. They've been writing about shopping. There's actually Debtors Anonymous. We live in a consumer society. Smoking is mentioned. I include it with the drug addictions. There's work being done with caffeine. I feel like I'm missing some big ones. Workaholism. The list of addictions goes on and on. And the basic definition of an addiction is something that you do that you can't stop. That's the first part of it. This is the layperson's definition. I won't get technical here, but I like this. Something that you do and you can't stop, and it has deleterious consequence. In other words, it's affecting your... Freud said he had two goals in therapy: to help people zu lieben und zu arbeiten, to love and to work. And it means that you're addicted to some substance or behavior. The latter addictions, the behavioral addictions, are sometimes called process addictions. So you're addicted to a substance or a process that you can't stop once you get started with it, and it's getting in the way of your love or your work, just to put it really simply. It's getting in the way of your life, physical health, etc. And so recovery for everyone opens up the door to anybody coming in. So we have, Colleen and I started a group. It started in our living room, and now it meets at a treatment facility where we invite people to come in. It's a mindfulness-based group where people come in to the group. Some of them are family members of people that are addicted to substance or in recovery. Many of the members are in recovery themselves, not all of them from substance. Some of them are, we have members that are addicted to beauty and all that goes into that. And on the one hand, it can be kind of funny, but it's not so funny when it takes over your life. And one of the authors that I respect a lot is a Christian psychiatrist, Gerald May. He wrote a book called Addiction and Grace. It's one of my favorite books in the field of addiction. He comes to addiction from a spiritual perspective, and he was gutsy. He opens up in the first chapter of his book talking about his addictions and fills like the better part of a page with his addictions, and then opens up later of all the possible addictions from clients he's worked with, and he had done some questionnaires and so on. And I spoke earlier about universality. There was some relief in just realizing, gosh darn it, we're all addicted to so many things. And so why not talk about it in terms of recovery for everyone? I mentioned the group for a couple of reasons, is that it's open to everyone, including family members. Also that it expands the idea of addiction because it's done intentionally. The goal would be, I mentioned earlier how stigma can serve as a major barrier to treatment. Well, what would happen if we were to normalize addiction and be able to talk about it over lunch today? Would that be such a bad thing to be able to talk about the various things I'm addicted to? I even have people come to me because of this is my focus of my work, and they'll say, in fact, just Tuesday night, somebody came to me and they were saying, what was it he was addicted to? One person talked about being addicted to exercise, and as they talked about it, they just like to exercise every day. And I asked them, I said, well, is it harming you? Is it harming your family? And it wasn't. And so we framed the idea that we can also talk about addictions in terms of positive addictions. There are other terms for it for sure, but that's the one that I like. That what would it be like to talk about addictions freely, so that we can sort this stuff out together and hopefully reduce stigma, hence shame. So that's one resource, and the goal we do it pro bono. The idea is we just want people to do this as public service. Why not? Colleen and I both have skills in facilitating groups. We both have our list of addictions. We're human beings in there. And we love what's happening with that. So that's one example. In the same spirit as the Family Day that I mentioned recently. That was put on by UCLA. It was offered for free to the public. The Los Angeles Recovery Network used that as its first kind of outreach. It's people like me. They're addiction professionals wanting to invite family members, addicts in recovery, to come and to talk openly in an educated, informed way about what is addiction and what facilitates recovery. So that was an invitation, again, to kind of bring it out of the woodwork and get families to come out that might otherwise either hide away in their homes before, during, or after treatment. I want to talk a little bit about technology. A couple of resources here. I've talked to John Dupuy, my friend, the founder of Integral Recovery. With families that he works with, they come to Utah. He lives in a very remote area of Utah, hence wilderness therapy. they go back to New York and Los Angeles and wherever they're from, and he maintains, and he does this right now, he maintains weekly Skype sessions using Skype technology through the computer and the internet, maintains family Skype sessions really on an ongoing basis. It really is continuing care. And this constitutes most of his practice now. So he has clients. I was with him the other day when I was in Boulder, and he had a client session with somebody in Central America, a client in Central America, and it was right there in the living room. So Skype, there's a new technology. There are infinite technologies available. One of them I'm aware of is Zoom technology, which has a bit better fidelity in terms of visual. If you've used Skype, you realize there are oftentimes audio glitches, and the visuals aren't necessarily high definition. So there are other free technologies. I'm aware of Zoom. I'm not hired by Zoom to mention that. Just technologies are evolving that facilitate groups and family meetings online. We have a graduate from California Southern University, Michael Aharoni. He got his doctorate in clinical psychology here at Cal Southern. Michael is in the Los Angeles area, and he has a network called the Access to Therapy Network that utilizes video technology and has practitioners linked in all over the country, so that you have all 50 states are represented through Access to Therapy, and it's all online. It's all online. It's interesting, Michael's story is that his work began working with people that were housebound as a therapist. He was a marriage and family therapist for years before coming back to Cal Southern. And so he worked with people that were quadriplegic. He's told me some of the populations were really housebound. He worked with people that had severe diabetes who were not able to come, people that were in other ways limited. And he would go into their homes. And then it evolved from that into telephone therapy, and now it's evolved into video therapy. I'll say this much from my own experience providing video therapy, that within a few minutes, I wasn't sure how that would go if I'm talking to you and you're on a screen, but within a few minutes, that tends to recede to the background in my experience. And unless there's some technological dropout, which occasionally happens with Skype, which is unfortunate, we move into the session, and it's like sitting with the family. You now have the capacity to have multiple faces online, multiple voices, and so technology is catching up with that. I understand from my conversation with my friend Adam that there are all kinds of other technologies that are coming out. I read occasionally iPhone apps for people in recovery to check on their sobriety, to be able to interface with other groups online, et cetera. There are more and more resources, I think, that are function F technology that help with moving therapy just out of the consulting room of a therapist or out of the environment of a treatment, rehab. I want to mention one last piece here. In the context of being at this university, at Cal Southern, we offer courses that are all online, that are available. Our courses are available to anybody who's got a high school diploma. And so we have students that can come in and take a course or a series of courses. We have our addiction studies certificate, which is available to anybody at any level. So we have coursework that's available at the bachelor level for somebody right out of high school, let's say. We also have master's level curriculum and doctoral level curriculum. And it's accessible to our students, and anybody can sign up for a single course. We have a free resource that's available. I'm sitting with the moderator of the Master Lecture Series here, Tom Dellner, the university editor, and we have, at this point, an archived library. Many of, all these presentations are available online, and many of these presentations center around addiction and recovery. Those are available as free resources, and anybody can archive those from the living room with a laptop. So there's a real resource there, and there's a movement generally in education to working with technology hand in hand. So anyway, those are some resources for generalizing treatment beyond just formal treatment in a rehab. Engaging the family and family members and the addicts themselves in different community resources. Thank you.